Hi, everybody. It's great to see you. It's been a long summer without the Mid-Texas Symphony, so I'm really looking forward to seeing you all in September at our first concert season opener, September 8th, Sunday at 4 o'clock at Jackson Auditorium. And today, I'm very honored to be joined by our guest artist for this concert, Young Sun Choi on the piano, who will be performing Liszt's Piano Concerto Number 1. So I'm going to bring her into the studio. Hi, Young Sun.
Hi, Akiko.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for joining me. I know it's very early in the morning where you are in Korea. Thank you so much. It's 5:30 Central. For those of you who are tuning in later, not live, but later, on your own time, Young Sun, it's 7:30 over there, right?
That's right.
Yes. Well, we really appreciate you joining us early in the morning. And she will be flying to join us to play the Liszt Piano Concerto in a few days on September 8th. So, how we came to know Young Sun is that she is the bronze medalist of the Gurwitz Piano Competition that took place in San Antonio earlier this year. So, congratulations, first of
Thank
all.
you.
And Young Sun has been a prize winner at many other piano competitions, and she's a doctoral student at Indiana University after having gone to Seoul National University. So, welcome. Tell us a little bit about how you came from Seoul to Indiana.
Yeah. Well, many students from Seoul National University go to abroad. It could be Europe or United States or sometimes Russia for their um, studies. Um, for me, the reason that I came to the US was that I really wanted to experience the academic um, um, there, and the most important reason was my teacher at
Mm,
Indiana University. I really wanted to study with Professor Arnaldo Cohen, who was the first prize winner at Busoni competition,
wow.
and well, he is still the most important mentor for
Mm,
me.
that's fantastic. And then tell us about this competition that took place earlier this year in San Antonio. Not far from where Mid Texas Symphony plays, and many of our musicians hail from San Antonio also. And this used to be called the San Antonio International Piano Competition, I think,
Yeah.
recently renamed the Gurwitz Competition. Tell us what that competition was like.
Well, it was fantastic. It was one of the most great competition that has the perfect organization,
Mm,
and also the audience in San Antonio were they were just great. They were so sweet. I could feel their passion for music, and I'm so grateful to perform again in at the Jackson Auditorium,
yes.
where I did the first two rounds at the Gurwitz.
Oh,
Yes.
oh,
So
you've been there. Okay,
you
fantastic.
didn't know. Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
So
Okay.
I'm very looking forward to it.
So it'll be a familiar place for you. Um,
Exactly.
That's really great to hear. And
Mhm.
for everybody tuning in now who might not have known, we asked Young Sung to play the list on very short notice over the summer. We had another soloist who was a different instrument, fabulous performer and composer who unfortunately had to cancel. And it was about a 17-minute piece, and I thought, what else would I like to do in its place? And unfortunately, our founder, Professor Anita Windecker, who was a pianist, passed away earlier this summer. So I thought I would really like to do a piano concert in her honor.
Mm.
And Liszt number 1 is the perfect length,
Hmm.
to go in that program. So I picked the piece and we started looking for a pianist. And now many people play the piano great, but not everybody has the list one at their fingertips. So I'm dying to know, when we called you and said, do you know the list one? Did you, I mean, obviously it's in your repertoire, in your fingers already in the past, but had you done that before? Do you learn all the major concertos just in case something like this happens, or?
Well, yeah. Well, honestly, when I got the request, I
Mhm.
didn't, I didn't, I haven't learned Liszt first concerto,
Okay.
so I was just um happy to learn one of the Liszt concerto. Well, most of the pianists learn piano concerto number two of
Yes.
Liszt.
Yes.
So that was very uh, special to learn number one for me. And I went to the bookstore right away and I bought list number one.
Oh
Uh,
my
uh,
gosh.
for
Thank you
yeah,
so
and
much.
of course, and I found it really fun to play all those wonderful scales, trills, and I like the conversation between the orchestra and the piano soloist. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. I'm astounded to hear that. We're so grateful that you could step in on relatively short notice, but the fact that you picked it up on such short notice, that's amazing. So thank you so much, Young.
You're
Um,
welcome.
Speaking of lists, obviously you've played other pieces by Liszt, including the second piano concerto. Um, what is he was himself a piano virtuoso, rock star, causing
Mhm.
Liszt mania. What does Liszt mean to pianists?
Um, for me, it's always scary to play list pieces because it's virtuosic and
Yes.
it requires so much power sometimes. But um, on the other hand, it also requires the lyricism and singing in his music. So I think it is the it is why list pieces uh, are loved by people. It has so many elements, virtuosity and lyricism and power,
Yes,
speed. Yeah, yeah. So I just love it.
that's great. Now, this concerto is unique for many reasons, including what you listed, but also because it's in four movements, but they're very short and they're kind of
Yeah,
connected. And the
right.
same music comes back over and over again. What is it like to perform something that's basically one fell swoop with very little interruption?
It's um it's way better for performer.
Oh,
Well, for me at least,
yeah.
to concentrate and to make the four movements as a whole one unit. Um, I like that unity that the
Yes.
theme is appearing for the whole movement.
Yes.
Um, it is obviously harder to memorize four movements if they have um, different themes
Right.
for each. Yeah, so I like the way that he composed it.
Yes. And he really transforms each of those themes in many different ways.
Yeah.
So sometimes, I'm looking at it and I forget that I already heard this theme earlier because it's dressed up in a different way. But he's so clever with his transformation and kind of making it all one thing. So we don't even
Mhm.
notice, even though I'm sure you notice. Um, what is it like to? I know you've done multiple competitions, including the Gerwitz. What is it like to compete in one of those? I'm sure it's very intense and obviously competitive. But tell us a little bit about kind of the backstage feeling of those things.
Hmm. Um, I don't know about other instruments, but for pianists, we have to memorize all the music. Um, so the first thing I have to do is just looking at the score and listening to the music to memorize it. And it's always stressful, but
Hmm.
for me it's really important to just concentrate on my self or my performance and not
Yes.
to care about others during the
Yes.
competition because it'll just make me more uh, stressful. So I focus on making music more beautiful. I'm just try I just try to feel the music and connect to the audience.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's the only way to get through it.
I think what you said about connecting to the audience is so important and amazing because, especially in a competition, we're
Mhm.
thinking about ourselves and our performance. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we do this to connect to other people, the
Mhm.
listeners. And I'm sure a big part of your success, aside from your technical prowess and musicality, is your understanding of the relationship to the audience, that you're
Mhm.
intentionally reaching out with your playing. Is that something that came to you early on in your piano training, or does it come more with time?
Yeah, I didn't know that when I was younger. Um, I I learned the importance of being audience during the COVID, you know,
Ooh,
because
yes.
yes, it was so painful to play for nothing. Um, I I learned the importance of audience and then what they give to me during the performance. They make me focus more, and they when I get the applause from them, I I feel like that's the most that's the happiest moment for the performer, I think.
Yes. The connection with the
Yeah.
audience
Mm-hmm.
is the best part of what we do. So,
Yep.
well, fantastic. Now you're in Korea right now. You're coming to Seguin very soon. After Seguin, where will you go?
Um, I will go to Europe. I'm going to Italy.
Hmm.
For 4 concerts there.
Wow.
Yeah. At first, I will go to Cremona for the Cremona Festival and exhibitions. Um, and then after that, I will perform for the Monza International Competition. I was the first prize winner there, and I will
Congratulations.
go. Yeah, and then I will perform the opening concert for that competition. And then I will move to a small town um, called Cavernago, and I'll play a solo concert there. And at the last, I will perform another solo concert in Milano, and then I'll be back in Seoul, Korea, for another 2 concerts.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're a world traveler, literally. That's
Well, yeah.
great. Now,
Thank you.
I know you must get asked this a lot, but for pianists, most pianists can't bring their own instrument. You have to
Mm.
deal with whatever piano is at the venue. Um, is that a big, obviously it's a challenge, but is it also like just nice to meet you? Here we go, boom, kind of relationship with each piano? What is it like when you meet a new piano at that venue?
Right. That's sometimes my violinist friends say that, well, I'm so jealous that you don't have to bring your instruments. Yeah. Well, I like um I like the fairness during the competition, that every
Hmm.
pianist has to play on the same piano. And
Ah.
then, yeah, and of course, it's really hard to get familiar with that piano
Mhm.
for a short time. But I think it's fantastic that I can experience so many different kinds of piano, and depending on the acoustics, the sounds um, will be different.
Yes.
Um, so um, that's the only experience that pianist can have. So I appreciate it.
That's amazing. And your violinist friends should be lucky that they get to choose the instrument they play on.
Right.
Yeah, the reverse is true. Well, Young Sung, thank you so much for joining us from the other side of the world. As we're heading into the evening, you're starting your day in Seoul, Korea. So we're wishing you very safe travels to Seguin. And we are really grateful that you're jumping in on the list. First piano concerto. And we can't wait to see you on September 8th. So thank you so much and see you very soon.
Thank you so much. I look forward to meeting you.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye, Young Sun. Wow. Well, what a great pianist and person. And we're so lucky to work with her and meet her. I'm very excited. And I'm glad to know that she's already been to Jackson Auditorium. So a little familiarity is a good thing. So thank you, Young Sung. So the list, she mentioned that most pianists play number two. So number one might not be as popular, but I think the audience will find it quite familiar. Liszt is, of course, known for popular pieces like Hungarian Rhapsody number two, Totentanz, Mephisto Waltz, many piano and non-piano pieces. He's known for his Paganini-like virtuosity. He was kind of like the rock star of the day. People just kind of almost fainted, whenever he performed because he was so amazing. So he had the Paganini level stature and mania. And as Young Sun said, his music has many faces. His music is very human. And also very sacred at the same time, even though it's all secular music and instrumental music. He was very interested in becoming a priest. I don't think he ever went through with it or he was admitted, but toward the end of his life, he really studied religion and thought about being a priest. So there are parts of it that sound like it could be a piece of sacred music, but then the rest of it is just all out virtuosic, very blood curdling, exciting music. This concerto is unusual, not only because it's cyclical, meaning that the same themes unite all four short movements, creating one 17, 18-minute piece, but the beginning of the piece just starts right away with this outburst from the orchestra. Um, and it's shocking. And it's a very 19th century, mid 19th century technique. You're shocked by this big entrance from the orchestra, outburst from the orchestra. And then the piano responds to it with a flourish. And then there's a back and forth between the orchestra and the pianist. And then we go on and we go into the main part of the piece. The opening has this very march-like statement from the orchestra, dum, ba-dum, bum, 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 which apparently Liszt and the conductor, Hans von Bülow, put some German words to it, meaning like, oh, you don't even know what this means. And after the martial opening, the other half of the orchestra says da-da, and then that to them was like, haha, like you don't know what we're talking about. It's a big puzzle, it's a big mystery. And then the pianist jumps in and plays this amazing um, kind of improvisatory figure, and it's very exciting. So Liszt is always keeping us on our toes. He brings multiple themes back and forth, and this opening that I just sang will come back toward the end of the third movement, and then we finish the end with a big fast march, and it's a big tour de force, of course, for the pianist, but also for the orchestra. And the orchestra and the piano are very much integrated, as Young Sun mentioned. So it's going to be a great challenge for us to put it together quickly, but we really look forward to having her in Seguin with us. So great to do this piece, exciting piece with her. Now let's talk about the other 3 pieces on the program. We opened this concert with an overture by Franz von Suppe, Light Cavalry Overture. Suppe was an Austrian composer, also in the 19th century. He was known mostly for his operettas, which are light operas, almost like popular music or musical theater at the time. And unfortunately, we don't really know the operas themselves very well, but his overtures have survived very well, and they were really a big part of the symphonic repertoire in the 20th century. They've been a little bit phased out recently, but I think we should start bringing them back into the regular repertoire. The one that we're doing is a Light Cavalry Overture, but of course he's famous for the Poet and Peasant Overture and several others. The Light Cavalry Overture is, as the title says, is about a regiment of soldiers. Of course, back in the day, before tanks and whatnot, soldiers used to ride on horsebacks and fight, travel and fight. So in a matter of 8 minutes of an overture, we hear first a call, 2 trumpets alerting us to the light cavalry arriving. And they're echoed by the French horns, 2 French horns. And then the entire orchestra echoes their arrival to announce their arrival. And suddenly the violins, both first and second violin sections, not just one person per section, but the entire violin section play a big solo in this fast-paced minor key mode, very probably Hungarian inspired. And these soldiers are coming into your town, which is part of the plot of this operetta, Light Cavalry. And so it sounds very dangerous and like something bad is going to happen. But soon it gives way to the famous theme where the 2 trumpets have this galloping horse theme, yum, ba-da-dum, 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 ba-da-da-ba-ba-bam, bam. And it's very jolly and happy for a while. However, in the middle, we have a very dark and a slow part, very dramatic. It's a string section solely, and sounding kind of reminiscent of the Hungarian Rhapsody that Liszt is so well known for. And it sounds like these soldiers who came into the village or your town are very dramatic and controversial and a little bit scary, but also very exciting, and people in the village are kind of reacting to them. But after that, the horse music comes back, and the overture ends in a very, very fast, bright ending. So it's a very exciting and very popular overture that I think you'll enjoy. After that, we'll play the Liszt and then intermission. And after the intermission, we're going to play one of my favorite works, one of the great masterpieces of American symphonic repertoire, Symphonic Dances from West Side Story by Leonard Bernstein. Now, many of you know West Side Story, the musical, which has been turned into film twice now, most recently, just I think last year, the Steven Spielberg version. But of course, the Robert Wise version in 1957 is very, very famous and iconic. And that's a film adaptation of the Broadway musical that Bernstein was part of the quartet of creators that came up with it. It was very dance-forward, dance-centric musical theater. So Jerome Robbins, the choreographer, not only choreographed it, but he basically had a lot to do with the final version of the story and how everything flowed. Um, Arthur Lawrence did the book, the story, and Stephen Sondheim did the lyrics. So it was an all-star team that created this. And of course, Leonard Bernstein was at the center of it, creating the music for it. Why are we doing the symphonic dances from West Side Story? Symphonic dances, because the music, although a lot of it is sung with very famous songs and melodies that we love with words, it's quite instrumental. It's very virtuosic, very rhythmic, and many of them are dances, literally dances, dance inspired or just pure dances that he took from different cultures. Speaking of cultures, this story was inspired by Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, as many of you know, but it was set in the west side of New York City. And it was set in the slums, and where these young teenage gangs were fighting. And originally, apparently, it was supposed to be between Irish and Jewish teenage gangs, but it changed to just American Caucasian gang and Puerto Rican gang. So imagine how different the music would have sounded if they kept the original racial ethnicities of this story. But because it's an American and Puerto Rican gangs that the story is about, a lot of Leonard Bernstein's music is American or Latin. There's a lot of jazz influence and there's a lot of Latin dancing in it. And that's what make up symphonic dances. It is purely an instrumental suite. It's all in one movement, like 23 minutes of it, but in 9 sections that follow the story. Sometimes the music is not chronological to the film or the musical theater, but you will recognize a lot of it. It starts with the prologue, the music of the two gangs fighting and the tension kind of rising between them. And there's a chase until they run into a cop who blows a whistle. And the two gangs leave each other pretending like nothing was wrong because they don't want to get caught by the cop. The music segues into the famous song Somewhere, where the main characters, Tony and Maria, who are from the opposing gangs or families, meet, fall in love, and they know they can't be together in this lifetime, in this world where their families and friends are fighting each other. So they fantasize about a world where, you know, someday, somehow, somewhere, they can be together and everything is peaceful. Very beautiful, featuring a lot of string solos from the orchestra. And of course, we have the famous dance Mambo. I hope you're ready because there's a little bit of audience participation if you're new to this piece. But you'll know what I mean when I get there. But it's a fun dance. This is the scene from the high school dance at the high school gym. And the two gangs are kind of competing with each other dancing. They're having fun, but they're also kind of being competitive with each other. So it's very intense Latin rhythm and a humongous percussion section to make it very, very Latin. We have a very sweet cha-cha and also kind of an interlude called The Meeting Place. And a lot of the music is taken from the famous song Maria. And it's arranged into different scenes, like Cha-Cha in The Meeting Place, but I think you'll recognize it. We also have the famous Cool jazz number. This is where the gangs are trying to tell themselves to stay cool, you know, don't blow up, you know, stay cool, stay in control. But it's really hard to control your emotions when you're angry at the other gang. So it's kind of like touching a hot stove, this music. You know, you can tell that they're really trying to suppress, you know, musically what's going on. It's quiet and stealthy at the beginning, but every so often it pops like you're touching a hot stove, their temper. Eventually, the two gangs do fight, and that's the rumble movement. It's very violent, exciting, but violent. And at the end, there are casualties. Very sad. After that is one of the most beautiful endings of any pieces of music. And this is what makes West Side Story so poignant. This ending, after the death, at the end of the fight, the rumble, it's very, very slow. It's beautiful. And the music comes from I Have a Love, which is part of the duet that Maria and Anita sing called A Boy Like That from the middle of the musical. And it goes into this I have a love, Maria saying, I have a love, that is all I need. He needs me and I love him. It is the most beautiful melody, and Bernstein brings it at the very end to close. He turns that song into a funeral march. So underneath that I Have a Love theme, you will hear the low instruments intoning boom, 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 like they're carrying the corpse of Tony and all the other boys that died in these two gangs from their fighting. And not to give it away, but the last three bars are the best thing. It's very soft, but it's the orchestra singing somewhere, somehow, someday. Those three lines that Maria and Tony sang earlier, but this is Maria wishing that there is no fighting, and the surrounding gang members realizing a little too late that it is better to not fight. It is better to get along and be peaceful, but it is too late. This music is so poignant. And of course, there's been many iterations of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet set to music, famous ones. And they're all poignant, but why is West Side Story, to me, it's even more poignant than any of the famous pieces about Romeo and Juliet. And the story itself, I think because Romeo and Juliet were from very wealthy aristocratic families. Not that it makes their death or tragic ending any better, but something about the story of the West Side Story makes it even more, it has another layer of tragedy, I think, because these teenagers were, from poor backgrounds. They didn't have a lot going for them in the society, and they're just struggling to protect their turf, protect what they had, their power and control in their neighborhoods. But that wound up creating the wrong kind of tension and hurting both sides and hurting this young couple that was in love. And there are sometimes in life tragedies that nothing can fix. And I really feel that Bernstein nailed that sentiment, that there's nothing that can be done about this horrible situation, except it makes us all realize what's really important, that love is important and not fighting. So I hope you'll enjoy this. And I mentioned the song Maria earlier. And I want to talk about one thing, aside from all the jazz rhythms and Latin dancing and, unusual instruments and audience participation. There's one thing that makes Bernstein's West Side Story so cleverly constructed. That is his use of intervals. An interval is the distance between two pitches. So it could be going up or down, but you need two pitches to create at least a semblance of a melody. So a note is going higher or lower or staying the same. And we measure those distances in music theory so that we can, no matter what pitch we're starting from, if it's this interval, it's this far up or down. And the most famous interval in this Bernstein is called a tritone. And my keyboard's not on, so I'll try to sing it. Da da. So let me sing this. Perfect fourth is da da. Perfect fifth is da da. Okay. And then in the middle, da da da. That's Maria. That C to F sharp. Let's say if you're starting on C, that's called a tritone, either augmented fourth or diminished fifth. If you're like music theory nerd, that's how we measure the interval. And that distance sometimes is called the devil's interval because it's unresolved. It makes us feel neither happy or sad. It's just in that uncomfortable tension. And that's because the two intervals that are closest to it, the perfect fourth and perfect fifth, are perfect because they ring very true and comfortably. They sit very comfortably in the air. But the half step difference, it makes us all feel a little bit uncomfortable. And from the beginning of the prologue all the way to the end of the symphonic dances, Bernstein is using this tritone constantly because the tension between the two gangs is unresolved. The tragedy is unresolved. You can't fix it. You can't fix this tragedy. And that sense of unresolvedness is perfectly described with this tritone. And Bernstein sprinkles it everywhere in the cool fugue, Maria, of course, and the prologue, the opening. You'll hear it everywhere. So that's the tritone, the famous Maria interval. Another famous interval, and this is the beginning of Somewhere. There's a da da. That's called a minor seventh in music theory. And when I used to teach music theory 101 at a college, I would make the students, be able to sing or memorize each kind of interval. And I used Somewhere, the beginning of Somewhere, as just a mnemonic device to memorize what a minor seventh sounded like. And of course, Maria, I used that for the tritone, augmented fourth, diminished fifth. And, two of the mnemonic devices were from the same piece, Bernstein's West Side Story. So that tells you how important his use of interval was. So the wider the interval, it takes more energy to get up there. It takes more emotional energy to get up there. And that's the tension that he's creating. However, it's also more open than a small and short interval, so it's harder to get to, but it's more far away. And there's a sense of like, it's something I don't have yet, but somewhere, Somewhere Over the Rainbow from Wizard of Oz is an octave. So it's even wider distance. So you're going all the way to the rainbow, I guess that's for a rainbow is further away than Somewhere. But these large intervals were used often in music compositions to imply some sort of a longing distance. So that's another reason the Bernstein West Side Story is an amazing piece of music. So it's a tour de force for the orchestra to play these 9 sections without a stop. Different characters, different rhythms, very, very tricky, but very, very exciting. And I'm so excited to show off our musicians playing this very dramatic music. So that's West Side Story. And then to close this concert, we have another kind of a dance. It's very famous. It's one dance for about 16 minutes. And it's Ravel's Bolero. Ravel was one of the preeminent French composers, and this was premiered in 1928 as music to a ballet. And today it is one of the most famous pieces of classical music. I think it's probably more often played without dancing, just as a straight up orchestra showpiece. And but it was originally a ballet, and it was commissioned by a Russian emigre who danced in Ballet Russe in France, called Ida Rubinstein. And she commissioned it, co-directed it, and she was the main dancer of this original choreography by Nijinsky. And she was a very unique woman. She danced with Ballet Russe for a couple of years and quit and went out on her own, started her own ballet company. And she always did her own thing, apparently. And she was a very, very sensual dancer. And apparently the choreography to Bolero, the original one, was no exception. Apparently, this choreography had one female dancer in the middle of a large table on the floor with many male dancers surrounding her and watching. And toward the end, some of the dancers in the prop list at Palais, at the Paris Opera, where this was premiered, apparently on the prop list were 12 knives. So they think that there were some male dancers that were carrying knives. And at the end, the music becomes very violent. And I'll tell you what happens in the first 15 minutes in a little bit. But at the end, the music becomes, climax is very loud, very almost violent, and it kind of collapses. And so does the dancer. It's almost like Bizet's Carmen, another French composer writing about a Spanish dance-inspired subject. It's almost like Carmen, being killed at the end. But it was a very female-centric choreography, origin of this piece. Now let's talk about the piece itself. Ravel's Bolero, yes, Bolero is a Spanish flamenco dance rhythm. So it begins with a snare drum intoning this rhythm, and he doesn't get to quit. For the entire 16 minutes of the piece, he has to intone the same rhythm, da, 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 etc. And then the violas and cellos pluck their strings a la guitarra. And so this is the basis of this Bolero dance. On top of that, we hear a melody. Many of you know this melody. It's very famous. And first, it's sung by the flute, single flute, and then a clarinet. And then Ravel, bassoon, comes in for the second half of this melody. So each half of this famous tune is repeated twice each. And then the whole theme is repeated 4 times. It's not boring because he changes not the music, he changes who is playing that theme and how many people are playing it. It begins with 1 instrument at a time, soon 2 instruments at a time, 4 instruments, and instead of just playing unison same tune, sometimes the instruments are in multiple different keys, creating kind of this overtone atmosphere. And then the accompaniment also grows from that plucked violas, cellos, and 1 single snare drum into bigger and bigger accompaniment. So the whole piece is a giant crescendo, both in terms of dynamics, orchestration, how instruments are used, and harmonies. The harmonies get more juicy and juicy and juicy as time goes on. And it's not, people think it's the same thing repeated over and over again. It is 4 times. But the 5th and final time, he changes 2 things aside from orchestration and the loudness. He only plays each half of the theme once. He varies the second half a little bit to make it last a little bit longer. And he changes the key for the first time in 15 minutes. After hearing the same music, same harmonies over and over again, it's shocking. And it elevates all of us, makes us sit up in our chairs. And then he comes down and the orchestra just blares this loud kind of crashing sound, and it literally collapses on the ground, the music. So it's very exciting. It's massive. And it's not boring. Repetition is not boring because it's hypnotic, and he changes things other than the melody, and he shocks us at the end. So he's playing with our expectation. And of course, I'm sure the choreography is building up different things, the dance moves as the story goes on. So it's a very exciting piece. Like the Bernstein, it's a dance. Like the Bernstein, the subject matter is a little bit dark, but like the Bernstein, it really showcases the entire, symphony orchestra that grew so large in the 20th century. Actually, the instrumentation between the Bernstein and the Ravel are very similar. So the second half, there will be very few, hardly anybody will be moving off the stage between the two pieces. It's almost the same orchestra. So that's a nice coincidence. And I'm so glad we get to showcase so many of our great musicians and guest musicians as well. So that's the concert. We're really excited to share this with you. And that's on September 8th, Sunday at 4 o'clock, Jackson Auditorium. Our next concert is November, Sibelius Second Symphony. And we have a trumpet concerto by Arutunian, and a Helios Overture by Nielsen. And December is Merry Melodies. We have great guests as usual, a potpourri of wonderful holiday pieces. In February, we have a jazz-themed 1920s, Roaring 20s kind of concert at the Brontex. So that should be a lot of fun with a chamber orchestra from the Texas Symphony featuring our principal trumpet, Andrew Janek, playing a lot of jazz greats. And we're going to play also chamber orchestra repertoire that were heavily influenced by jazz, French music. And then Bond and Beyond, James Bond in March at the Civic Center, and April we close with Ode to Joy, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. So we have a great season in store for you. We've missed you so much, and we can't wait to see you in September at Jackson Auditorium. So thank you so much, and see you soon. Bye-bye.